Hi, welcome to VanPelt Sales. I am Mac VanPelt, and you are on the VanPelt Sales YouTube channel. We would like to talk today a little bit about the early Ford transmission synchronizers. This would be specific to the 2- and 3-speed synchronizer action on a 3-speed transmission. Ford developed their very first synchronized transmission in 1932, and that was a fairly simple, sort of crude transmission synchronizer that they used from 32 all the way through 1938 and part of 1939 transmission production. So I'm going to show you a little bit about those and demonstrate a little bit how they function. So the very first version of that is the synchro that took the 6 balls and springs. And as you can see on the table in front of me right here, we've got the 6 balls and springs that get loaded into the pockets in the center of the synchronizer hub. And these hubs have the brass built right into the rings. That's manufactured into it, front and back. So those are not serviceable, they're not replaceable. If that has to be replaced, you replace the whole synchronizer hub. So those springs and balls get loaded into here. It's generally done with a spring compressor, like a hose clamp, and then it's loaded into the synchronizer hub. These synchronizer hubs are pretty easy to identify on the early stuff because the synchronizer shift fork groove is more or less in the center of the synchronizer. And whereas the later style, the synchronizer fork groove is offset to the rear towards second gear. So that's pretty easy to look into a transmission and see which one you have. Without the balls and springs loaded in there, you've got free movement here. But once those are loaded in, and this is another one that's preloaded with all the balls and springs, it's very difficult to do that. And I'm going to demonstrate here how we usually check them. You take a plastic mallet and just wrap it enough to move it off the center, which is the neutral position. And you can see the splines inside the synchronizer. And if I restore that to its neutral position, you're going to hear it click. And that's a very firm detent click into neutral on these. So that's the way they operate. And they also move back and forth on the shaft for the early transmissions. Once they're slid on into place, they can move back and forth a little bit. So these are the 2 early style synchronizer, or pardon me, transmission shafts. 32 through 35 here, 36 through 38 right here. And those again hold the early style synchronizers. When Ford redesigned the transmission synchro for 1939, they had their first version of it, which was this style right here, that had, as we identified, the 81A synchronizer hub. And you can tell by the location for the pockets for the balls and springs, of which there are 3 of them, right here, and here, and here, that those fit into the synchronizer sleeve, and that's going to provide a sliding action back and forth. And the action of the balls and springs is going to help hold it into neutral. These are not part of the assembly to help hold it into second gear. These are a neutral centering device. And another identifying feature of the early synchronizer sleeves is the diameter of the sleeve. And this was, the inside diameter here is the same. The fork location is the same. Front to rear is also the same. What became different was the diameter of the flanges. You can see it right here as I hold them side by side. The early synchronizer sleeve, 81A 7106, was smaller in diameter for the fork groove. The groove itself is the same diameter between the 2, but it's the difference in these flanges right here. The reason Ford did that was the change in 1940 when they went to the side loader transmission. The fork tips were a little more spread out on those, so they needed to make these flanges a little bit bigger in diameter. So you can use them interchangeably if it's a top loader transmission. the forks work the same on either one. If you have a side loader transmission, it's got to be the bigger flange on the synchronizer. So 40 and newer has the bigger diameter flange that can retrofit back to 39. We get a lot of questions when we sell parts as to the synchronizer insert kits and why we can use one versus another. And when I lay out the parts here for the latest style, what you'll see here is we have Ford's 39 design right here, which had the 3 plates with a hole in the center, the 3 little springs, and the 3 1/4-inch ball bearings there. When we came to the post-war versions of this transmission synchro, 1945 and newer, Ford redesigned all this, and they changed the hub so that they removed the pockets. As you can see right here, they just simply removed those pockets. The inserts are the same. They fit the same, that same gap either way. But they went to this style pressed steel insert that has a little bump in the center for centering for neutral. They loaded those in there, and then you have 2 of these wire springs which are designed to hold the synchronizers in place and put outward pressure on them. So the design, as we've found out over the years, with the balls and springs was not a good design. Ultimately, Ford changed to this style here on the later transmissions beginning in 1945 production. Well, we get calls all the time where a guy has the earlier style synchronizer with the early hub, and he has these balls and springs, and he's asking if he can purchase a new kit for that. We found that in practical experience, you can put the later kit on this earlier hub without any problems. It installs just the same as it would on the hub that came out in 1945. The wire springs are used just like that, and it gives you a more reliable synchro insert assembly. So there's less chance of a ball popping out. If you overshift the transmission slightly, you can have one of these little balls pop out in the transmission, and you know what's going to happen with that. It's going to drop down inside the transmission. If you're lucky, it lays in the bottom of the gear oil in the bottom of the case. If you're not so lucky, it's probably going to get caught between a couple of gear teeth, and that's bad news because that ball bearing's very hard. You'll probably break some gear teeth. So for that reason, and just a smoother shifting action, we like to put the later style kit on all of these, whether it's the earlier hub with the balls and spring pockets, or obviously the later ones, which is what they were designed for in the first place. So yes, you can put these assemblies back in your early 39 transmission, but is that what you want to do? It's not what we do in our shop. So we would recommend always purchasing the later style kit to put in this 39 style hub. So we're going to continue with the assembly of the synchronizer using the late style insert kit. You get the 3 inserts with a little bump out in the center, and you have the 2 wire springs with a little bump out that matches. That's going to fit underneath an insert, and the purpose of that is so that it doesn't rotate when it's underneath there. That'll hold the spring from rotating around, and that way you don't uncover one of the inserts. So when I assemble these, I usually put a rag or towel underneath the 2 pieces, drop the inserts down into their slots with the little bump out facing outward, and then take one spring, fit it underneath one of the inserts, and then I'm going to fit the bump out here underneath the next insert in line, wrap the spring around, and I'm going to catch the last insert and use the little pick tool to help guide it underneath that insert. So I have loaded, as you'll be able to see right here, I've loaded all 3 inserts with the wire spring underneath this one here. So when you go to do the back side of it, flipping it over, I'm going to pick a different insert to put my bump out. So it doesn't matter which one you do. Loading that there, catch that middle insert with the bump out, and pretty easier if I set her down there, and then rotate around again to catch the last one. In this place, they all went into their positions. I like to make sure that the spring is centered pretty well. I might adjust that over to the side a little bit. And so now it's properly assembled, and you can feel the centering action of the inserts when you move it back and forth. That's neutral right there. And you'll be able to tell the brass rings, these synchronizer rings actually are forged bronze. They fit in their place. They're going to have a fairly close fit to the insert itself, but there's a little bit of rotational movement there. And that is so that when the shifting action happens, the synchronizer can move slightly in rotation and line up its teeth with the teeth and the splines inside here, inside your synchronizer sleeve. So as I put that in there, place it, you can see it goes just so far in rotation. And that's the normal setup for that. Same ring, front side, same scenario. It doesn't matter which way you go, which position, as long as you get it in there all the way. That's a fully assembled synchronizer, late style, with the early hub, the 81A hub, using the late style inserts with the 2-wire springs. And again, that's the later style hub that those come with normally anyway. There's another little detail, and we're going to point this out here about the differences between these two hubs. So let me do that here right now. All right, so we've got the two synchronizer hubs that are used from 39 through 1950. And for all intents and purposes, they're identical and interchangeable, how they fit on the main shaft, inside the synchronizer sleeve, and so forth. What's different besides these pockets, or lack thereof, is the front to rear distance on these hubs. And that's measured very easily as you go through the center of this. And we measure on this, we're going to have just over an inch. It's basically 1.001. Yeah, I'm going to recheck that for you here. 1.001. So 1 inch and 1/1000th of an inch. That's the length front to rear on that hub. The 81A hub is going to be about 65 thousandths less. So 0.935 is the measurement on that. And what Ford did with those is they added a main shaft spacing washer, the 81A 7069A or B. The A is 65 thousandths, the B is about 70 thousandths. Those are select fit washers. And those fit on the main shaft behind the synchronizer hub. And second gear is going to come right up against it. So with 65 thousandths of washer added there, you have equal spacing on the two. That's why they're interchangeable, as long as you have the spacing washer there. Because there's some wear that occurs in transmission parts over the years, Ford liked to have the end plate clearance close to 4 thousandths behind second gear if they could. So they made this in the extra thick washer at 70 thousandths. That allows you to select whichever one fits to give you the nicest, closest end plate that you can get on that transmission. And you want to have minimal end play on these so that your shifting action is smooth. It doesn't pop out of second gear. So to wrap it all up, there's different kinds of synchronizers that Ford offered over the years for the different gear sets that they use from 32 really all the way up through 1950. And the question that would come up a lot of times, and really the reason for this video here, is to demonstrate that the late style insert kit can be used on the earlier 39 and 40 transmission synchronizers that Ford had back then. So simply exchanging the one style for the other works just fine. And we do it in our shop every day in our transmission rebuilds here. That wraps up the tutorial on the synchronizers. We hope you enjoyed it, enjoyed sharing our knowledge with you. And please come back for more information from vanpeltsales.com and visit our website as well. Thank you.